The agreement begins with an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. Both Washington and Tehran have pledged not to initiate military action or threaten one another and have committed to respecting Lebanon's sovereignty. However, questions remain over how Israel will respond, particularly regarding its operations against Hezbollah.
Israel will have to take a more limited approach than it has done recently. It will probably have to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Certainly it will have to do so after 60 days if there is a full agreement between the United States and Iran. But no doubt Israel will still continue to work on limiting arms getting to Hezbollah and limiting financial flows to Hezbollah.
The deal also requires both nations to respect each other's sovereignty and refrain from interference in domestic affairs. That provision may prove controversial among Iranian opposition groups, especially after earlier U.S. statements expressing support for anti-government protests inside Iran. A key feature of the agreement is a 60-day timeline for negotiating a final comprehensive deal. That clock has already started. The White House says both President Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian have signed the memorandum, although it remains unclear whether a planned signing ceremony in Geneva will still take place.
I will.
Why not release it?
Well, because I'd like to get a formal setting first before we do that, but I have no problem with that.
The United States has also agreed to begin lifting its naval blockade around Iran. According to the agreement, restrictions on Iranian ports will be phased out over the next 30 days, while American military forces will gradually return to their pre-conflict positions. Perhaps the most economically significant development is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has committed to allowing commercial vessels safe passage without charging transit fees. Traffic is expected to resume immediately, though demining operations and the removal of military obstacles is still required. The closure of the strait during the conflict sent oil prices soaring worldwide. The agreement also outlines plans for a massive reconstruction and development package for Iran worth at least $300 billion. U.S. officials emphasized that American taxpayers will not directly fund the initiative. Instead, regional partners and private investors could finance projects with Washington's approval.
Again, on the responsiveness and benchmarks met and things that, just like this talk about resources and money, it's based on performance. Everything is based on performance. No giveaways here. There's no trust here. It's all verification.
On sanctions, Washington has agreed in principle to end economic restrictions on Iran, including those tied to United Nations resolutions. However, the timeline for lifting sanctions remain under negotiation. At the heart of the agreement is Iran's commitment never to develop or acquire a nuclear weapon. The deal calls for international oversight of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, with the International Atomic Energy Agency expected to play a key role in monitoring compliance. U.S. officials described that commitment as one of the agreement's biggest victories. In the meantime, both sides have agreed to maintain the current status of Iran's nuclear program while negotiations continue. The United States will also begin easing restrictions on Iranian oil exports and related financial transactions. Another major concession involves Iran's frozen assets abroad. The agreement states that restricted funds will gradually be made available, with future releases linked to Iran's compliance with the deal. Finally, the agreement establishes a monitoring mechanism to track implementation and compliance. Negotiations for a permanent accord will begin immediately, with any final deal expected to be backed by a binding United Nations Security Council resolution. While the agreement has been hailed by both sides as a historic step towards stability, significant questions remain unanswered, including the role of Israel, the pace of sanctions relief, and how compliance will be enforced. For now, however, the ceasefire is officially in effect, marking what could be the most significant U.S.-Iran diplomatic breakthrough in years.